for the third time. Greetings. Greetings of peace and blessings to everyone. I'm so happy to be here in Columbia, South Carolina with the UU Fellowship for the second time. This is a follow-on to last year's visit, where we began a conversation then about the goddess, about the divine feminine, about the ways in which she has been expressed throughout all times. And she's still present and alive today, even though in many ways her presence has been obscured or obliterated or underground or sent in hidden messages that we have to then look beneath the surface to find what's there. So that's been a project that's been on my heart, in my consciousness for a number of years, constantly digging. You don't have to dig so hard anymore, though. Scholars are proliferating with research about the divine feminine and the ways that she was alive. We all know, and we won't go back through the Paleolithic and the Neolithic times and into the Middle Ages. My particular interest is then following her beautiful presence as it peeked through during the Iron Age, actually, and during the time of in the Middle East, during the time of Yeshua. Yeshua being the Aramaic word for Jesus's name. There's so much. Many people who are UUs are already goddess aficionados, so there's not a lot of explanations or trying to get people to come on board with this concept. And people have done a lot of, been to plenty of museums, read a lot of books about the ways the goddess has been alive from the beginning of time, from the beginning of time. UUs especially are tuned. There's a course. Some of you may have taken that course. I think it was offered at some point. I think someone told me last year. Cakes for the Queen of Heaven. It's a curriculum, a UU curriculum that talks about the ways that she's expressed across the world and in various cultures. But my particular interest is the near Middle East or native Middle East during the first century, during the time of Yeshua, and those years just preceding the time of Yeshua, to see what was that ground out of which this particular figure in history came. Because all of us, if we're living in the United States of America today, we are influenced by mainstream interpretations of Jesus that range from the most fundamental and evangelical all the way to the most progressive. This figure in history had great impact, and my belief is that when we recover some of what the divine feminine was during that period of time, there might be a little more openness on the part of more mainstream or even more conservative Christians if they could understand and see how Yeshua might have been related to the goddess or to the feminine. During the time leading up to the first century, there's innumerable books, articles that are being produced every week, talking about some aspect of the feminine as it's being unearthed. It used to be that we got our primary research from archaeologists who were digging up artifacts and finding images of the feminine. In fact, from the very earliest times, the earliest artifacts we find were all women. It wasn't until later in the history of humanity that we start to find figures of the masculine. And then there was a shift. And this shift has already happened by the time we get to the first century, where for the most part, the images of the feminine are going underground, except in specific cultures and specific places. The primary goddesses of the Middle East were Inanna and Asherah. Both of those goddesses eventually morphed, changing by cultures, much as you've learned throughout history. Whenever there was a conquering nation, whenever there was a group that was subsumed and taken other places, they took on the gods and the goddesses of that culture, and they brought a little bit of their culture in, and we start to get these incredible mixes. And there's, in fact, at one point, I thought that I might take on the project of trying to find, well, how did Asherah and Inanna morph into what eventually became Ishtar and Isis? Then I found out just about a year ago that two women had already done that task in this incredible, very academic work, but I have to note it because it's so incredible, the work they did. Julia Ashergrove and Joan Goodnick Westenholz wrote a book called The Goddesses in Context on Divine Powers, Roles, and Relationships in Mesopotamian Textual and Visual Sources. How's that for a title? They did the tracking about how things became syncretized, fused, fissioned. They have a number of categories that they track the ways that goddesses in this area were melding and molding and becoming something new. Or generally, it was much more about fusion and syncretism, where there used to be hundreds of goddesses. Now we have one or two primary goddesses. And while they had great power, we then watched that power disappear. While they were the top of the pantheon, they then become the consort of, or the lover, the mother, in terms of the more feminine roles. But what we know for a fact is that Asherah was seen as the consort of El in one region and as the consort of Yahweh in another region. This was before the 1st century. There's even evidence in temples where there are Asherah poles. Asherah was seen as like a tree, and so the carvings were those of trees. The Asherah poles were of trees. There's evidence that in the temple itself, there was an Asherah pole and an altar to the goddess. And it's been seen, I saw this in the Dead Sea Scrolls exhibit, that in the altars of families, there would always be some little area that was to the goddess. It used to be that it was very, controversial when William Devers, who's an academic, wrote a book, When Did God Have a Wife? But one of the latest books I read, I think it came out last year, is not Did God have a wife, When God Had a Wife. The attitudes have changed, where it's not a matter of having to, justify ourselves and get people to accept the fact that there was this primary role that women were playing during this time. We don't have to argue whether or not now. It's a matter of who were these women and what was the influence that they had and what was the wisdom they brought. Wisdom. That's how we know her in the Hebrew scriptures. Hukmah, as we read in the opening passage, the hukmah of my name. Last year, I spoke a lot about how we found hukmah in the book of Proverbs. And we find her dancing with Yahweh at the beginning of creation. It's an alternate creation story to the creation story in Genesis. We also find her preparing a table. And everyone is invited to the table. Those who are honored, those who are despised. The rich, the poor, the honored and dishonored. Everyone's invited to the table. This becomes very important as an anchoring text when we get to the time of Yeshua. Hukmah is also known as, in our modern language, Neil Douglas Klotz puts the title on it, Sacred Sense, capital SS, Sacred Sense, Holy Wisdom, or Simple Presence. Where does wisdom come from? How do you know wisdom? From within. The oracle at Delphi, know thyself and you will know the universe and you'll know God. This wisdom has been with us from forever. And it is the feminine, the kind of what has been termed women's intuition, and sometimes made it fun of, and sometimes honored. We've learned not to pay attention to that deepest wisdom. One of the things that the recovery of the sacred feminine is doing for us in these times is helping us to find and not only discover it, but to value it and to act on it from our own inner wisdom, from our own intuition. So here we have Yeshua, this Jewish mystic and prophet. He was a creation mystic. His teachings brought us back to the reality that the power of creation is present in each and every moment, in each and every breath. And with each and every breath, we go back to the original breath, back to the earliest beginnings, to that place of purity where all possibilities are present for us and for our lives. Because for a number of reasons, actually, I won't go into all of them, but for a number of reasons, there were people in the first century who did understand or think about Yeshua as the incarnation of Hukmah. One of those reasons was that he spoke with the formula at times of these statements that said, I am, da 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 da. So if you remember when we read before from Thunder Perfect Mind, she says, I am, da 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 da. I am the virgin and the whore. I am the first and the last. I am the honored and dishonored. I am. And you'll find this throughout time, that many times when the divine or the priestess was speaking, she used this formula, I am. And then we have, for example, in John, incredible examples of Jesus is saying, I am. Those are very problematic statements. Maybe next year we'll explore some of those and look at what happens when you reinterpret the I am through the lens of Hukmah. If Jesus is speaking as the reincarnation of the feminine, he's saying I am, which he would have said in Aramaic, Ina, Ina, Ina. Now, isn't that interesting? It sounds like Ina, Ina, Inana, but it means I. And I am means connecting that small self I to the big I, to the larger sense. And that any time that we, Inanna Lakmadahai, I am the bread of life. He's saying when any of us connect our deepest, our inner self of I to the larger I, we are Lakmadahai. I am the bread of life. Lakmadahai, Lakma comes from the word hukmah. I am bread, food, understanding, wisdom. The root of that word Lakma means all of those things. I am the bread. I am the wisdom. I am the understanding. I am the food for life. And you are that whenever you connect to the deepest place within yourself. We won't go through all of those I ams. I am the way, truth, and life, but I'm going to give you the quick interpretation. I am the road, I am the compass, and I am the energy or the fuel to get there. All of those words point to those realities, not I am way, truth, and life, as has been interpreted and used as a battering ram by evangelical Christians in modern times. When we understand this through a different lens, things open. Yeshua was also understood maybe as the embodiment of hukmah because he invited everyone to the table. His life, his ministry, story after story, the woman at the well, talking publicly with a woman, talking publicly with a Samaritan, calling the tax collector to say, I'll go to your house for dinner. Blessed are children, let them come unto me. Whoever might be those who are not so much in power, Jesus honored. Everyone was welcome at the table. And in psychological terms, what that also models for us from hukmah and from Yeshua is that our inner table means we honor all voices within ourselves. All the conflicting voices, all the places that are hard to accept. We acknowledge and accept those and listen to them and tend to them and care for them. And then in the outer table, it calls us to a life of justice, where we listen and honor and respect the voices of all. Know thyself. Connect to the great I am. Those are the words of hukmah. Those are the words of Sophia, who is hukmah in the New Testament. Those are the words of Yeshua, and those are the words that you're going to find from yourself when you enter that space of the great I am. We're going to close with a chant. This is a chant to Asherah, the consort, the divine